Hi, Dave here with Barton Industries. Today we're going to show you how to install the Barton shifter in your 2016 to 2018 GT350. Let's get started. We're going to start by simply removing this panel here. And you just grab a hold of it and it'll just pop off. And once you have that panel off, then you're going to have two bolts here that you have to unscrew, and you're going to use a 7mm socket for that. And you're going to have to do the same thing here on the driver's side that you just did. And then, so once you have the driver's side off, we're going to need to unscrew the shift knob. And they use Loctite on it from the factory, so you may need to use a heat gun to get it off, or a good strap wrench. But I've had this one off already. So once you got your shift knob off, then we're going to want to lift open the console, and then we're going to just want to pop this off here. And the easiest way to do it is to start in the back and just kind of work your way forward. You can use like a pry trim tool if you need to. Don't be scared of it, it'll pop up, you're not going to break anything. And then once you got it up, there is a cable here or a wire that just needs to be unclipped. So with it up where you can move it, your pull-up collar is going to need to be separated from the plastic part of the shifter. So we're going to want to just pull up on it, and there's three prongs that we're just going to want to kind of pry on. You just pry on one of them. And then just pull the collar up once you have one of them kind of pushed back. And it'll just pop right off. So the next, what we're going to want to do is to remove the sound pad and the rubber boots. So the next thing we're going to need to do is to remove this rubber piece, the roll pin, the spring, and then the reverse lockout here. It's just a little rubber piece with some holes in it to go over the roll pin. You just kind of squeeze it. You should be able to pinch it and get it off of there. So now we have access to the roll pin. Now you can use like a little punch for this to help get it started more to one side. I'm going to use a pair of channel locks here to kind of just squeeze it out. Make sure you go above the one side so that the other side of the roll pin will still move. Alright, so I pushed it out a little bit further. Now I'm just going to start working it out. Alright, so we got the roll pin out. So now we can take the spring off and the reverse lockout off. And we have to do that because when we go under the car, this piece actually needs to come through the shifter in order to get the shifter out of the car. Okay, so once we're under the car, what we need to do is use a jack to support the rear of the transmission, and then we need to use an 18mm socket to remove the two bolts here and the two bolts here to let the transmission come down a little bit so we have some working room to get the shifter out of here. Once you have the 4 bolts removed, you can start to lower your transmission. Alright, so with the transmission lowered, we need to remove the pin that goes through the linkage in the shifter, and there is a C-clip here that goes through the pin itself. So we just need to take a flathead screwdriver or something that we have just to kind of push on that and pop it up. And careful, because you probably will drop it. Like that. And now that that's out, we can just remove the pin by sliding it over. Once you have the linkage and the pin removed from the bottom of the shifter, what we need to do is take a long extension and a 10mm socket on a swivel and remove the 2 bolts that hold it in there. Now we're going to move the front side. And then go ahead and pull the ring and the screw off. And there's a good chance, or yours will have a rubber boot on the bottom, but ours does not, just because we've already had it in and out of the car a bunch of times. So once you have that ring off the bottom of the shifter, then what you can do is just go ahead and pull the whole unit out of the casting here. And that's the reason we had to take off the reverse lockout from inside the car, is because it wouldn't have came through that hole. Alright, I've already got the bolt out to show you guys because it's kind of hard to see up there. But you're going to use a 10mm ratchet wrench, and at the end of the shifter arm where it connects to the transmission, there is a bolt that you need to undo. So you're going to want to undo that all the way out, and then you kind of got to wiggle it a little bit and pull down on the transmission to get it fully out. So now once again we're going to want a 10mm on a universal swivel and a long extension, and we're just going to go ahead and remove those 2 nuts. I'll go ahead and get the other side. So once you have both the nuts off, then you're alright to just go ahead and pull the whole shifter down off those studs. So once you have the shifter free of everything, what you need to do is work the arm towards the driver's side of the drive shaft, and then we're going to just go ahead and stick the shifter right through the floorboard back into the car here, and then we can just go back inside the car and grab it, and then grab the Barton shifter while we're at it. Okay, so this is your factory shifter here, and the first thing we did underneath the car, I'm going to do a quick recap because I know it can kind of be hard to see under there, was we removed this pin from the linkage connected here, and this pin went through them, and this clip here we kind of pushed it up with a screwdriver and then just pulled this pin out. And then once the linkage was down, what we ended up doing was on the bottom of the shifter there was this ring and 2 screws. We removed the ring and the screws, and then we slid the shifter out from the bottom of the casting here. And then next, this bolt here was in the transmission connecting the 2, and we unscrewed that. And then this rear bracket here, there were 2 nuts on the bottom side of it that we took off, and that allowed the shifter to come down, and then we simply removed it through the floor pan. So now the next step that you're going to want to do is actually remove this factory rear bracket. We're actually going to reuse this. This thing is actually very stout from Ford. We could have went ahead and replaced it, but had we done that, then the shifter would have just cost more, and there was really no sense in replacing this just because it is built very well. So you want to just take some soapy water and spray it down. And then once you have it, so that it'll come off of there, you just kind of work it right on off. I kind of pull up on one side and then do the other. And then you can go ahead and put your factory shifter away. And you're going to want to take your Barton shifter, and this is going to go through the floor pan like that. So this is actually towards the front of the car. Again, this is the rear of the car. So you want to make sure these two ears here are going towards the front of the car as well. So they actually go right on towards the shifter. And again, you can go ahead and spray this with some soapy water. Or you can use grease. It doesn't have to be greased, but anything really just to get the bracket on there. So once you have the rear bracket on, we can go ahead and work this on through the floorboard here. So instead of trying to show you everything underneath the car again, I'll just kind of give you a brief rundown. It's just going to be kind of reverse order of what we just did. So once you have this through the floorboard underneath the car, you're going to work this into the two ears on the transmission, and then you are going to reinstall this bolt here using your 10mm ratchet again. And then once that's in there, we are going to simply raise the rear of the shifter up until this bracket here goes into the two studs that are sticking down. And then at that time we can go ahead and put the nuts on those and tighten those up. And then what you need to do is you need to put the 4 bolts on the bottom side of the cross member back in. That was the very first thing that we removed. You'll put those 4 bolts in, go ahead and tighten them up at that point. So once you have the shifter all installed underneath the car, what you need to do is take the cartridge, and you want to make sure that the screw and the slot goes to the passenger side and that the reverse lockout goes to the driver's side. And whether you're running the flat stick or the pull-up style reverse lockout, it's the same thing with the slot and then the reverse lockout over here. Make sure the slot goes to the passenger and the lockout goes to the driver. So then we're going to want to take the cartridge and we're just going to set it in the profile here, the cutout. Make sure it's down there, and then we're going to take the 3 provided screws here. You're going to want to apply some blue Loctite to them, and then we'll just go ahead and set them in. And then you're going to want to take a 3/16 Allen wrench and screw all these guys down. So once they're all down, just go through and snug them all up. And again, make sure you apply the blue Loctite to them. So once you have this in, the next step is to go underneath the car, attach the linkage, and then we have one more screw like this that has to come up from the bottom side, and the reason is we couldn't put it in here because of the floor pan. So we're just going to want to come from the bottom side and install that. Okay, so once you get back underneath the car, you're going to need to take the provided screw here, and you're going to have a flat washer, a lock washer, and then you'll notice this hole here, and you're just going to apply some blue Loctite to it, and go ahead and start it by hand. Again, it's the 3/16 Allen wrench. And then you're going to tighten that up. Alright, so while you're under the car and do that bolt, the next step that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take the linkage and take the two ears and slide them right into the bottom of the shifter. And then we can take the linkage pin, and I find it easier when you're under there to start it on the driver's side. And then you'll kind of have to wiggle everything around to get it to line up just right, to get it to go through the bushings and the ears on the linkage here. So once you get it all the way through, then you're going to take the clip that you took off before and you're going to slide it. You probably can't see it, but there's a groove in the end here. You're just going to push it right back on over that. Just like that. And then you'll want to come back inside the car and we'll start buttoning everything up. Once you have the linkage hooked up to the bottom of the shifter and that bottom screw in, the next step is to make sure that our first and second gear gate is where it should be. This stop here, when we come over in neutral, that's actually a physical stop, so we can adjust that stop if need be. So what I like to do is just thread a shift knob on here right quick. And if you come over real lightly to it, you should still be able to get into gear. If you come over real hard, you should still be able to get into gear. So you want to really pull it over, make sure you can get into gear, and then again, just lightly, make sure you can get into gear. If you're locked out from either the light side or the heavy side, what you can do is these two bolts here, just loosen them up. This will go back and forth as an adjustment, and then just tighten them back up once you get the gate or the stop where you need it. So next we need to reinstall the boots here around the shifter and the floor pan. So we're just going to go right over the shifter. And the first thing I like to do is take this part of it and seal it to the floor pan before I try to get this part into the groove of the shifter. It'll just make working with it a lot easier. So I like starting in the front. So we kind of have that down around here now. Now what we'll want to do is kind of start stretching this around the shifter. So yeah, make sure the boot around here is into the floor pan, and then make sure that this part of the boot goes into the groove around the shifter. And then we're going to take this second boot, and again you have the offset, so this is going to just go right over the top of our shifter. And we have a groove right in here that needs to go into, and we also have the same thing on our OEM style shifter, the groove here. So put that over the shifter, and then we're going to need to take the sound pad here, and that's just going to go right back in. So once we have the sound pad in, all the rubber in, the shifter in, the next thing we're going to want to do is to remove the leather boot from the center console itself. That way we can modify the boot to go onto our flat stick or our pull-up collar. If you choose to go with the OEM style and retain your factory pull-up collar, then you can skip this step. But I like to take it out. You're going to clip these, kind of just squeeze them together as you're pushing out. I'll kind of flip it over so you can see here. So this is the section we're going to want to take out here. And again, if you just squeeze these in and kind of push, they just start to work themselves out. So now we have this piece out, and then I will show you how to get the factory pull-up collar off and to get it onto the flat stick here. Okay, so what we have with the pull-up collar here is that this is actually two pieces, this plastic piece here and the main body. So what we need to do is separate this plastic piece from the main body, and the easiest way I've found is just to grab some pliers, and you're just going to want to start working your way around it, just kind of prying forward and pulling up. You can see now we have this portion of it out. This portion is still attached to the boot. So now what we need to do is it's actually glued in here. So we're just going to kind of push down to separate it. Just work your way around it. And now we have that part out, and we have the boot. What we're going to want to do is take a razor blade, and because the opening in the boot is a little smaller than our flat stick and our pull-up collar groove, what we need to do is just remove a couple of the stitches here. So if we just take this and very carefully just about to there, just a few stitches so that it'll open up a little bit wider. And then we're going to want to take and go right over the shifter with it. And what we want to do is pull the opening past the groove. And then take the zip tie we give you, make sure the zip tie is in the groove and the boot, and then go ahead and snug it up. Get it good and tight, and take your razor blade or a pair of snips and cut off the excess. And whether it's the flat stick or our reverse pull-up collar, on here the groove is here, it's the same process. Next thing we're going to do once we have this on is we're going to take our center console, we're going to work that back into place. And while you kind of still have it up in the back, you're just going to want to re-snap in your wiring that you removed earlier. And just kind of tap everything back down. And then we're going to take this piece here and just push it right back into place. And to work your boot back down to give it a good finished look there. Then we're going to need to take the two screws you removed out from here and go ahead and reinstall those. Once you have those installed, you're going to want to take the plate or the panel here, Get that started back into place. And just tap her back together. Then take the provided jam nut. Screw that down. So next we're going to want to take our shift knob and thread that down. Now the shift pattern's not lined up, so what we're going to do is back the shift knob off just a little bit till it's straight. Then we'll take a 3/4 inch wrench and go ahead and tighten the bottom of that jam nut against the shift knob. And there she is. So now you're just going to want to make sure, go through all the gears. Make sure reverse. Again, that's a push down with the flat stick here. And then first, second, third. And that's it. So with the OEM style here, if you choose to use our billet pull-up collar, you're going to need to do the same thing with the boot as you did on the flat stick. And then once you have the cartridge installed, I recommend pulling it up and putting it in reverse to kind of hold the lockout portion of it up. And then you're going to want to take this whole piece with this boot installed. It's going to come over the top, and then there's an O-ring groove or an O-ring down here that you need to push to get past the ridge at the bottom here, and that'll lock it in place. And just a little twisting motion will help snap it below that O-ring. And once you're below there, it's not going to come out. And then you'll just go ahead and finish it up just like we showed you.